All right, so for this unit, rational expressions, really quick, rational expressions, a rough definition, is basically anything like this, where you're gonna have x in the denominator. We're not gonna graph it this unit, we will next unit. It makes the graphs look pretty weird and different, but basically we need to deal with essentially fractions, that's what it means by rational expressions, that have a variable in the denominator. So we need to know about a couple things. First, when you see it, you know what it is. Got it. Now we need to know what we can do to this to change it. We're going to talk about equivalent terms. So the idea is if I were to multiply this by 1, it would be the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply it by 1, just 1 in a different form. So I'm going to multiply it by like 2 over 2. 2 over 2 is the same as 1, right? So when I multiply it, it becomes 2x plus 4. This is an equivalent term. We need to know this for later units when we're doing multiplying and adding these rational expressions together, but basically you just need to know that there are equivalent terms like this where they're the same thing, okay? The other thing we need to know how to do is to simplify. So if we're gonna get an expression like this, if we had an expression like this, simple division like we've done before, we try and find what can divide into each other. So 2 and 4, you can divide that, and then that becomes a 2 and that becomes a 1. The x plus 1 can divide by each other, and if this was simplified, the top would just be 1, because this is all gone and it's just a 1. And on the denominator, there would be a 2. The x plus 1 is gone, we canceled it out, and there's an x. So this original term we had, let's erase all that red marks. This is equivalent to this term on the bottom. Now, the last thing we need to know about is this thing called NPVs. These are non-permissible values. These are essentially what x is not allowed to equal. So for example, the only thing that this is whenever you have a number, whatever x would be that would cause you to divide by 0. Because if you divide by 0, the universe explodes. No, it's not a real number. It's impossible to do because you can't cut something into 0 pieces. So in this example we have right here, x could not equal to 0 because then it would just be 1 divided by 0. That's not that complicated. But if we look at these other ones, so let's look at like this one for example, we think, okay, 2 times what equals 0? Oh, so we could write it like this as an expression to figure it out, and we would say, okay, divide by 2, x equals, 0. So our non-permissible value for that would be 0 as well. But because these two are equivalent, we need to look at both the answer and also the original question. The kind of trick for looking at the original question is that whatever for each kind of term or each thing in a bracket like that you have will have its own non-permissible value. If we look at the 4, there's no x's and there's nothing there. We look at just this x right here, that's the 0, that we already have that. This one, x plus 1, the non-permissible value for x there would be x cannot equal to negative 1. So for this original term, the non-permissible values would be, right here, 0 and negative 1. The last thing I want to mention for this unit is that you are going to have to learn to love factoring. Because whenever you get a question with trinomials or binomials or anything like that, for example, this one we're going to do on the left, you are going to need to factor. I'll show you what that looks like, and it makes the questions a lot easier to do. Basically, if you just looked at this question here and you tried to do it right away, there's nothing to do. But once you factor it, it becomes a lot easier to see what you have to do. So let's go through this harder example. So I'm going to divide, for the numerator, it's a trinomial. Okay, so I got 2 times 6 is 12. So I know it's going to be 3 and 4. So I'm going to write 2x squared minus 3xy minus 4xy plus 6y squared divided by, that's a difference of squares, so it's going to be x squared minus 4y squared, x squared plus 4y squared. Okay. On the numerator, and again, if you're having trouble with factoring this stuff, okay, if the factoring's messing you up, you need to go back and review it. It needs to be a basic skill for this unit. So on the numerator, I'm going to common factor, so I got just an x, 2x minus 3y, and at the top I have negative 2y, gives me 2x minus 3y. On the denominator, this is now a difference of squares as well, x plus 2y, x minus 2y, x squared plus 4y squared. It's not a difference of squares. All right, do it again. 2x minus 3y, x minus 2y. All right, I have simplified everything now. Now what I need to do, or sorry, I've factored it all. Now what I need to do is see what's common between the numerator and the denominator. So if I look right here, x minus 2y and x minus 2y, I can divide those out and they're just gone. It looks like that's the only thing I can divide. So my final answer would just be 2x minus 3y over x plus 2y, x squared plus 4y squared. So now we want to write out,